Hansen was suddenly released from that agonizing pain, and he was dropped to the cold comfort of the ground. After the fall, he could not help but yell. His body was in anguish, and when he moved, he could feel a number of broken bones about his body, in addition to his torn organs. A slight movement was all it took to make him feel as if 1,000 knives were stabbing him all at once. It was fortunate Hansen was as powerful as he was. Any ordinary surpasser would have died at first contact with this place. Hansen wanted to cast his Dongxuan Sutra to simulate the holy light and heal himself, but he couldn't. The blood flow of his entire body was messed up, and he was unable to cast a single skill. Hansen spoke to the gourd beside him, as his heart sank. But then, Hansen realized that despite all the wounds he had incurred and the lesions that had opened up across his body, he wasn't bleeding externally. All the wounds had scabbed. And as for the internal bleeding he could feel, nothing ill was coming of it. The blood that came from the organs did not swell up someplace, but instead managed to flow around his body even without the pumping of his heart or blood vessels. Blood Pulse Sutra. Hansen was delighted at the sudden realization, and so he cast it. As he did, he prayed and hoped. This must work. He easily cast the Blood Pulse Sutra, and his messed up interior did not seem to prohibit his usage of the skill. A strange power burst from his blood and went to every cell, fixing and restoring every part of his body. His organs, his bones, his torn flesh, every inch of his being was recovering. Hansen noticed he did not need to focus on the Blood Pulse Sutra, as the energy from his blood was recovering his organs by itself. No wonder it is a Blood Legion skill. It really is quite powerful. Although the recovery of the sutra was slow, and it wasn't as fast or efficient as the Holy Light, it was enough to save his life under the dire circumstances. It would take a while before he fully recovered, so he made the most of it and laid down as comfortably as he could. The air was pure where he was, and he had a feeling that he had never felt during his time in the Second God Sanctuary. In comparison, the Second God Sanctuary's air qualities seemed poor and dirty. Am I in the Third God Sanctuary? As Hansen thought this, he tried looking up. All he could see was the color green. Hansen noticed he was beneath a tree that was around 5 meters tall, and its leaves were entirely circular. The leaves knitted together like a parasol, shielding him from the sun rays. But from the branches, Hansen noticed many crosses hanging down. As Hansen wondered who had hung so many crosses on the tree, he realized what they actually were. They were short swords. Every short sword looked identical, and they were about 2 feet long. Each blade was approximately the width of 2 fingers, and they were pitch black in color. But then, Hansen realized it might have been a spirit that did this. Spirits were, after all, renowned for doing weird things. If he was discovered by a spirit, he wagered no good would come of it. Genoseeds. This must be the Third God Sanctuary. Hansen realized he was beneath a Geno tree. The black short swords were Geno weaponry. He didn't know if he ought to be glad or worried. In this place, spirits, creatures, and humans grew Geno seeds, and now he was directly underneath the fruit of one. He wasn't sure what he was going to meet. If the Geno tree's master was a beast, Hansen would likely become its afternoon snack since he couldn't move. Hansen looked at his Sea of Soul, planning to don his Devil Ant King armor for protection, but when he looked inside there, he froze. The black crystal in the Sea of Soul was like a black hole, absorbing the life force around it. Hansen was shocked. Ever since he found the black crystal, there hadn't been anything amiss with it. But now, the black crystal was absorbing life forces, and it was quite terrifying to see. The speed at which the black crystal was absorbing the life forces was alarming, and if its hunger was turned to Hansen later, he'd be a skeletal husk in under a minute. The black crystal kept absorbing life force, but Hansen realized he did not know where the life force was coming from. The black crystal spent quite some time absorbing it. When he looked at the tree again, however, he was given a surprise. The tree, once a rich emerald, had yellowed. The black short swords had lost their luster and attractive shininess and had now started to rust. The black crystal is absorbing the life force of the tree. Hansen was gobsmacked, unsure of how the crystal was doing it. But for Hansen, this was good news. It showed that the black crystal was not interested in humans, just flora. Still, he was a little apprehensive. The black crystal might not be interested in him now, but who could promise that it wouldn't like a taste of him later? The sword tree was getting more and more yellow, and its trunk was starting to rot. Many leaves departed their harboring branches, and the tree's grip on the swords became weaker. One of them dropped dangerously close to Hansen. It nicked his face right before sinking into the ground. Seeing the many swords rusting and preparing to drop at any second, Hansen planned on summoning Little Angel to carry him away. The last thing he wanted was to get impaled by one of those rusty blades. But when he tried to summon her, he got no response. He looked back into the Sea of Soul, and for some reason, Little Angel was little more than a light. He had no idea when this had begun, but there she was, evolving. Strange, how can she evolve? I didn't feed her a black crystal or anything. Hansen pondered the conundrum, but still believed it to be a good thing. As Hansen continued to think, the black crystal eventually stopped. He looked at the black crystal and found there to be some sort of liquid around it. There was no color or smell to the substance, and it was translucent like an actual crystal. Strangely, it possessed a life force of its own. Hansen focused his vision forward and noticed that the tree was completely dead. All the swords had dropped to the ground, and all the leaves had left the branches. It had no more life force, which had evidently all been sucked dry by the black crystal. No wonder it stopped, its bone dry. Hansen observed the dead tree and then heard a voice. Sister Lungshi, the ink sword tree that has been growing for 3 years is about to mature. There are 34 of them growing. Think of the riches. We can sell them to obtain a large amount of ordinary flesh. A man was talking excitedly. When Hansen heard what he had to say, his face dropped. Oh crap, this tree was owned by someone else. Yeah, the flesh should give us a lot of ordinary Geno points. A woman now replied to the man, and although she was quieter, there was audible excitement coating her voice. Oh, by the sanctuaries. I hope they won't be too mad when they see the tree. Hansen felt terrible. They sounded human, but the tree was clearly important to them. Hansen could now only continue praying for divine protection over whatever was about to happen next. Chu Langji and Chu Ming were engaged in merry conversation as they walked, but that soon came to an end when they entered the field and caught sight of their ink sword tree. They had spent the last 3 years cultivating it, and in a few more days they'd have been able to harvest the 34 ordinary gene weapons. But now, the tree had suddenly died. It had once borne an abundance of emerald leaves, but now only a few yellow leaves remained stubbornly clinging to its withered branches. Chu Ming ran in front of the ink sword tree, digging through the leaves like mad. He grabbed one of the rusted swords that had broken in half following its fall. Chu Langxi's face was robbed of all its color. Someone is here, and he looks injured. Ku Langxi ran in front of the tree, looking at Hansen as she came. A person. Chu Ming was vacant-minded when he asked, unsure of how to respond to the tree's death. He looked over to where Chu Longji was pointing, and saw a man lying on the ground. Chu Ming quickly ran over to him, grabbed him by the collar, and shouted with great anger, "Did you destroy our ink sword tree?" When Hansen was grabbed and shaken by the angry shouting man, his organs were injured. He tried to speak, but could only spill blood from his mouth. "Did you do it? Answer me. Did you ruin our tree?" Chu Ming continued to shout, shaking Hansen. The tree's death had really thrown him for a loop. "Are you crazy? Don't you see how injured he is?" Q Longji pulled Chu Ming away from Hansen and then knelt down to inspect him. "Lengzi, this man has just randomly appeared in our garden on the same day our tree happens to be ruined. Put 2 and 2 together, would you? He is obviously responsible for this." Chu Ming was consumed with madness. "Chill out. Ask him politely first. He's human, a friend at that." "I don't think he'd try to harm us on purpose," Shu Longshi said as she checked out Hansen. Chu Ming tried to say something but fell short. Shu Longshi shook her head and said, "Ask him later. Right now he is far too injured. Let's help him recover first. You can ask all the questions you desire later." Shu Longji then summoned a turtle and told Chu Ming to help lift Hansen and place him on the turtle's back. After that, they would depart the garden. Then they returned to a wooden cabin that was not too far from the tree. Q Longji brought over some medicine and applied it to Hansen's body. The medicine was intended for fixing simple things. "He's too injured. We need a doctor. This Yahoo might have killed our ink sword tree. Who cares if he's injured? Why should we fix him on our penny? We spent everything we had on that tree and toiled to nurture it for 3 years, with the dream that we'd live a better life once its fruit matured. But now, it's all gone. Where am I supposed to get that money now, huh?" Xu Ming was furious. Q Langzi understood where he was coming from, but she was conflicted with the desire to help the injured man. She didn't know how to respond. "I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine in a few days." After the rest, Hansen was feeling a little bit better, and his voice had now returned to him. "Oh, so you can talk now. That's great news. Hey, tell me something here. Did you destroy my tree? And if you did, why?" Chu Ming was keen to begin his interrogation. "Don't hurt him." Chu Longji stopped Chu Ming and then looked at Hansen and asked, "Who are you, injured one? And why were you in our garden?" Hansen sighed and said, "My name is Sunmu. I was attacked by a creature and ran this way. I saw the tree fall victim to that putrid beast, and I believe that is what caused it to die. It is my fault, though. Do not worry. I will accept full responsibility and be sure to pay you back in full." "Huh, you have wealth, and you're willing to pay us back. Well, all right then. 1 ink sword's price is equal to that of a portion of ordinary creature flesh. We had 34 swords in total, so give me the flesh of 34 ordinary creatures. Do that, and I'll let you off the hook so you can sod off back to where you came from," Chu Ming said. "Don't worry, a San always pays his debts. As soon as I'm back on my feet, I'll get to work on paying you back." After a brief pause, Hansen continued to say, "Is there a shelter nearby in which I could teleport back to the Alliance?" "What a joker, the spirit won't let us go back." Q Langshi looked at Hansen and asked, "San Mu, which shelter do you come from, and which creature did you encounter? Where else could he have come from, girl?" "He most likely came from the Thorn Forest. What other place has sordid creatures in these parts, eh?" Chu Ming interjected. "Yes, you are right. but I haven't been in the third god sanctuary long. I am unfamiliar with this area. Hansen suddenly coughed up some blood. Oi, don't die yet. You owe us money, remember? Chuming was a little repulsed. Chuming then thought something had to be amiss. He stared at Hansen and said, Wait, if you only just entered the third god's forest, where are you going to find us ordinary flesh? Well, can I pay you back in the alliance? Hansen asked. We can't leave this place, so what would be the point? Oh no, this guy can't pay us. He can't pay us. Kulangshi sighed and then said, Well, let's just focus on fixing him first. No, you s-hole, give me my tree back. Chu Ming's mind returned to the 3 years he spent carefully tending to the tree. He looked like a broken man. Humans were the peasants of this land, treated like thralls and treated even more poorly than creatures. After all, humans who ascended to this sanctuary would generally start off weaker than the lowliest of creatures. They had no chance of competing against a spirit. When contracted, all they could be expected to do was hard, menial labor. Growing genoseeds was one such task. Chu Langshi and Chu Ming had been sent to a garden to grow such seeds, and to avoid the cruel punishment of Qingming Night, they would have a quota of produce to deliver. 3 years ago, they pooled all of their savings together to purchase an ordinary inksword tree seed. Over the next 3 years, they labored to grow it and spent even more on its healthy cultivation. They would have been able to harvest its swords in a matter of days, but before that, Hansen showed up and ruined all they had slaved to accomplish. Hansen got out of bed this day and went outside to sunbathe. The yard was skirted by a wooden fence, and Langshi said that the house once belonged to an old spirit. The spirit used to be in charge, but after he passed away, Qingming gave it to Langshi. Although the sword tree had been destroyed, there were many other trees they had to take care of. Of course, the rest they grew were only enough to keep them going and allow them to live hand to mouth. Hansen approached the crooked tree and sat on its branch. He had been cooped up in the house for far too long, so his opportunity to sunbathe felt extra good. He sat down on the tree and felt a small life force stemming from the tree's root. It was very faint though, it was too weak and looked likely to die soon. But Hansen felt that the tree's life force was special. Was this tree grown by a genoseed? Hansen wondered as he brushed the tree root with his fingers. This is the dragon blood old tree. It grew from mutant class seeds. The old spirit that used to live here wanted to grow this tree, and to do so, he had to venture into thorn forest to collect the necessary nutrients for it. Unfortunately, he perished someplace within that perilous, knotted domain. A few days following his demise, the tree died too. This is a mutant geno tree, Hansen said, as he looked at the old tree. Yes, if we could tend and cultivate it successfully, we should be able to grow dragon blood fruit. They bear mutant class pet beast souls called dragon blood snakes. Selling just one of those would make us rich. Qulongshi paused for a brief while before continuing, but such thoughts are pointless, even if the tree was alive. It requires the blood of ordinary beasts, each and every day. I have heard that the blood of bloodscale snakes is the most beneficial, but unfortunately, Qingming Shelter does not possess any such snakes. The old spirit that once lived here perished in the thorn forest in search of them. That is a shame, Hansen said, feeling sorry in his heart. Even if such blood was available for sale, we couldn't afford it. This tree is a lost cause on us, Qulongshi said. After her brief explanation, she returned to the house and tidied up. Hansen remained near the dragon blood tree, evaluating what his next moves should be. He felt the black crystal in the Sea of Soul tremble. One of the bountiful water drops it had excreted earlier now exited the Sea of Soul and dropped onto the root of the tree. Hansen was shocked at this sudden turn of events. He witnessed the dying, crooked tree absorb the water drop without delay, and almost immediately, the weakened life force of the tree was ignited. It was coming back to life. Hansen's mood made a quick turn around, and he exclaimed to himself, "These water drops can raise old, dead wood back to life." The tree didn't recover its life immediately, however. It was still slowly absorbing the water drop. The next day, Hansen woke up on the wooden board he had been given for a mattress. He woke up to the sound of Chu Ming shouting, "Langshi, come out and take a look. The dragon blood tree is growing." Chu Ming, it is too early for jokes. Go get washed and get ready for work, Chu Langji said as she walked outside in her misty-eyed haze. She glimpsed the dragon blood tree and her mouth dropped. You weren't joking. How in the sanctuaries did the dragon blood tree spring back to life? She ran in front of the tree and noticed the presence of small, newly sprouted leaves adorning the branches of the tree. Hansen exited the house and saw the tree's overnight developments. He sensed the life force and felt the bounty of energy that had returned to it. Hansen walked in front of the tree and touched its trunk. He wanted to examine the life force with greater accuracy, and when he did, he frowned. The tree had been revived enough for it to come to life and spawn leaves, but it had absorbed every ounce of energy the water drop had given to it. The energy would not be enough for the tree to produce fruit. Another 2 days passed, and on that day, they noticed the leaves start to lose their color and turn yellow. Why is it dying again? Chu Ming asked in saddened shock. Kulongshi, with a wry smile, said, I don't even know why it came back to life in the first place, but I suppose without the proper nutrition it needs, its death ought to have been expected. Unless we can find the blood of blood-scale snakes, it'll just wither and die again. The old spirit was a knight-class spirit and was almost as strong as Qingming Knight. Yet, on his venture into the thorn forest, he died. It'd be nothing more than suicide for us to voyage into that wretched tangle of overgrown shrubbery. Han Sen suddenly interrupted them and said, I know a thing or two about restoring trees. Would you like to give my methods a try? Do not mess things up any further. You have only just arrived in the third god's sanctuary, so how would you know about Geno trees? Do you think these are akin to your finely trimmed hedges in the Alliance? Do you think you can sprinkle some tap water on the tree and everything will be fine and it'll grow? Do you really know how to help us with this? Han Sen answered, I have learnt much about botany from a certain professor I used to know. Of course, I was taught these methods back in the first god's sanctuary. You really believe in this, Yahoo? Look, it needs beast blood to grow. End of story. Nothing else will make it grow, Chu-Ming rebutted. But we're out of options, so let's allow San-Mu to try what he can, Q-Langshi said. Han Sen walked in front of the tree and circled it. He told Q-Langshi, I will do what I can, but if I do bring this tree to life, will that wipe the slate clean of my debt? If you can grow it, then yes. That would more than make up for the debt. And if we sell the fruit for a good price, we'll even cut you in for a portion of the sales. Then I will try my best. Here's to hoping it works. Han Sen walked to the banks of the river under the guise of fetching water, but he really wanted to perform a test. He still had 2 water drops left to use, but the tree had spent its first water drop over the course of 2 days. Using the 2 water drops directly wouldn't be viable long term. Han Sen wanted to look around for a few Geno plants to see if the black crystal would be willing to absorb their life force. For company, he summoned Meowth. Meowth, if I knew things were going to be this tough, I would have brought Princess Yin Yang. They may not be able to fight very well here in the third god's sanctuary, but they could at least chat with me. They could even massage me. Han Sen spoke to Meowth because Meowth was the only person that could talk to him right now. Meow. Meowth answered Han Sen and seemed to agree with what he said. Han Sen was surprised by the response he received, and he felt as if Meowth was smarter than before. Before long, Han Sen was able to find a plant that looked especially strong. Then, he looked at the black crystal in his sea of soul. Black crystal, perform your miracle once again. Everything depends on you now, after all. You got me into this predicament, so you can get me out. As Han Sen prayed, the black crystal moved. It became a black hole, and it absorbed the life force of the plant without reprieve. Within a second, the plant had dried up entirely. It was like it had been uprooted and left to wilt under the scorching sun for a few days straight. Han Sen was glad as he looked at the black crystal's changes. When the black crystal returned to normal, its body formulated another drop of water. In a joyous mood, Han Sen carried on his search for more Geno plants. No creature or spirit needed such plants, so there were plenty for the taking. Han Sen walked 3 miles and managed to find 5 plants, all in all. He walked another 3 meters and found a water vine near the river. It was purple in color, and it was about 1 meter long. When he approached the vine, however, Meowth suddenly engaged its battle mode. He meowed towards the water, as if he was warning Han Sen. Han Sen took the warning and stopped moving. Then, he stared at the water vine. He had been injured, and his senses were weaker than they should have been. But after careful observation, he noticed another life force near the vine. It was more powerful than any super creature he had seen in the second god's sanctuary. Han Sen, seeing the shadow near the water vine, saw that it was about the size of a fist. If you didn't look closely, you'd believe it was the shadow of the water vine itself. He noticed it was something alive, and judging from its shape, it was like a toad that was hiding in mud. But Han Sen was very alarmed by its life force. Han Sen slowly stepped away. If he wasn't injured, he'd have happily continued his approach, slain the toad, and grabbed the water vine. But for now, he couldn't do that. Once he was healed, however, he resolved to return and kill it. The toad, fortunately, did not seem to have noticed Han Sen, so without trouble, Han Sen decided to go back. Chu-Ming saw Han Sen riding Meowth on his way back. With surprise, he said, You have a pet beat soul. What class is it? Sacred blood from the first god's sanctuary, Han Sen responded. What is the point of bringing it here then? You could probably walk faster than that useless thing. I am injured right now, don't you recall? I'm only riding it due to my injury. Han Sen hopped down off of Meowth and retrieved the bucket of water being carried in his pet's mouth. Then, after approaching the tree, he poured the water on its roots. After that, Han Sen put the bucket aside and started walking back to the house so he could rest. What an imbecile. What use is that water going to provide, eh? I don't know. Maybe it'll be a boon and instigate the tree's revival. It might work. It might not. Han Sen then continued toward the house. Kulongshi wasn't half as disappointed as Chu-Ming, primarily due to the lack of hope she had for the tree in the first place. Only Chu-Ming was sulking, but there was nothing he could do about it. The next day, Han Sen was woken to Chu-Ming shouting again. He was becoming his morning rooster, it would appear. How was that possible? Chu-Ming spoke with complete shock and disbelief. but his body had frozen like a cartoon statue as he stared at the tree in the yard. Qiu Longxi walked out of the house and then froze mid-step. She too had caught sight of the tree. They were in greater shock now than they had been upon seeing the tree first sprout its leaves. Han Sen soon followed them out the house, and when he did, Xu Ming ran towards him in a crazed dash. "How did you do that? How did I do what?" Han Sen asked. "How did you make the dragon blood tree razzle and dazzle like this?" Han Sen did not expect the tree to grow this much, after the length of a single night, following an absorbance of one water drop. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have used an entire water drop. It was too obvious something was afoot, and the sudden flourishing of the tree would be far too suspicious. "You saw what I did, didn't you? I fetched a bucket of water and simply poured it on the roots of the tree. I didn't do anything else." As Han Sen made his excuse, he swore to himself he'd never use an entire water drop again. They did not entirely believe what he was saying, but they felt like that they had to. After all, they had watched him pour the bucket of water on the tree and later return indoors for the night. Furthermore, Han Sen was injured and had no money. As they were talking, Xu Ming grabbed the bucket and started racing off into the fields. "Where are you going?" "I'm off to the river to retrieve more water. If I do this, we can get it to grow even faster." Xu Ming replied excitedly. Han Sen then laughed in response and said, "Quality over quantity, my friend. Sometimes less is more. For if we add too much water to its roots, the results we seek may sour. Things could backfire and potentially ruin the tree." When Xu Ming heard this, he immediately dropped the bucket. He ran in front of Han Sen and said, "Yes, sir. From now on, I'm going to listen to whatever you have to tell me." Han Sen went to the river himself every day, mostly in the pursuit of wild geno plants. Han Sen managed to collect quite a few at first, but after a few days of successful collection, the amount he was able to find each day was dwindling. Han Sen rode Golden Growler for about a dozen miles in either direction along the river, but it was all to little avail. Fewer and fewer were there to be found. In 40 miles of travel, Han Sen was able to find 41 geno plants in total. After a few days of caring for the tree, Han Sen was able to determine the exact size of water drop the tree would need to grow. He later learned that the differing sizes were determined by how long the plants he collected had been growing. The size of their water drops reflected their age, not their life force. Even the water drops from normal plants were still able to bring a mutant geno tree back to life. It was a scary power, and Han Sen could absorb life energy to quickly grow mutant geno plants that might have ordinarily taken 100 years to grow naturally. The water drops seemed able to be used on pet and mount beast souls too. Meowth and Golden Growler had consumed a small amount of the water drops, and now they seemed to have changed. They couldn't drink much at a time, so Han Sen could not gauge its true effectiveness on them though. The Devil Ant King Beast Soul could not consume or absorb the water drop, unfortunately. He thought about trying to use a water drop on himself to see if it could help, but ultimately decided not to. This was because after touching the water drop with his finger grew older. He didn't dare consume one after this. Half a month had passed and still his finger had not recovered. Without a detailed inspection, its aged appearance was not obvious, but when you looked closely, you could see the wrinkles with ease. Another month passed, and Han Sen was far healthier now. He could cast Dongshuan Aura and his holy light to further heal himself. A few days after this, he was in tip-top condition. It's time to kill that copper toad. On this day, after exiting to the garden, Han Sen grabbed the water bucket as he routinely did. When Han Sen reached the water vine, the copper toad was still there. The water vine had grown 3 copper coins that had a sparkly, almost gold-like sheen to them. Although this fruit did not look fully mature yet, it was obviously getting close. Han Sen was planning to slay the toad and speed up the growth of the water vine himself. It had been a long time since he fought, however, and he thought he had probably gotten a little rusty. He exercised for a bit first and simulated the silver fox's thunder powers. He ran in front of the copper toad and pointed at it. Boom! The copper toad was shocked by the sudden intruder, and so it leapt out of the water enraged. Then it spat out a copper coin at Han Sen. Han Sen knew his attack would not hurt the toad, as he hadn't employed much strength. He was afraid of hurting the vine, so he wanted to draw the toad away from it first. Seeing the copper coin that was spat out by the toad rapidly approaching him, Han Sen threw another punch out and blew it up. The toad, seeing its copper coin get blown up, let out a wretched, angry shriek. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.